Welcome to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their triumphs and their trials. I'm Dominic, the founder and owner of Elevate Business Coaching, a Boston-based business coaching and consulting firm that specializes in working with law firms and their lawyers to build, manage, and grow successful practices.
And I'm Bob Furlong. I'm a certified exit planner here at the Bullfinch Group. I help law firms create programs to attract and retain their best associates, and this creates a clear path for succession and retirement for senior partners.
So, Missing Briefs, what's it all about? Well, it's about exploring and narrating the compelling stories or briefs of lawyers who have experienced significant challenges and successes in the business of law. What was their gap? What is it they were missing? What is it that they wished that they'd known? Well, it's our pleasure today to welcome Brian Balconi. Brian is the founder and the owner, of Boston-based Balconi Mediation Services, which specializes in business and franchise disputes. Brian's been an attorney for over 30 years. He has worked in private legal practice. He's been a general counsel, a chief legal officer, and he even was a company president for a couple of years as well, which makes it all the more interesting when I share with you that it was just in this year that Brian took the leap to starting his own legal practice. So, Brian, it's great to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing terrific, Dominic and Bob. Great to see you.
So, Brian, you have an interesting story, personal story, and you work in kind of a cool practice area. Before we learn more about that, can we go back in time a little bit? Think back to the beginning of your career in law. When did you actually decide to become a lawyer? What was the genesis of all this?
Okay, I guess we're going way back to the 1980s now. So young Brian Balconi got out of college. I went to Notre Dame. I got a business degree, and I went to work for an insurance company. And as part of the training for the insurance company, we reviewed all of the commercial general liability coverage forms. So those are that 30-page document in legalese that says this is what's covered, this is what's excluded. Sounds pretty dry, right? Well, not to me. So I thought it was actually pretty interesting. And I was really intrigued by the fact that the words were very, very precise and they meant very specific things. And then later on, they'd be interpreted by a court, and the court might disagree and think that it means something else. So that whole thing was very interesting to me. And if you think about those coverage forms, it's really a contract, right? So I was really interested in business law. So at the time, I was deciding whether I was going to get my MBA or my law degree, and that kind of tipped the scales and said, I'm gonna go be a lawyer.
And why did you choose? Because you actually have made a more recent change. You've done franchise work, and now you're doing mediation. Why did you choose to this practice area?
Well, so I started out. So when I got out of law school, I was in a law firm, and just a quick story about this. So I was in the office one day, and we represented a lot of service station owners, and a client came into the office, had a piece of paper, it was a letter, and at the top it said, "Notice of termination of franchise agreement." So even as a young lawyer, I knew that wasn't good. So I met with the client, and it was a 90-day notice of termination, which meant after the 90 days, the franchise agreement was going to be terminated. The business was going to have to be shut down because the franchisor or oil company was going to stop delivering gas to the gas station, right? You can't have a gas station without gas. So it was going to have to shut down. So I wish the franchisee came to us, 90 days prior to it going into effect, but actually it was just a few days before. So I still remember it was a Thursday, came in, and what we ended up doing is we ended up working all weekend, and including and especially this young lawyer at the time, doing legal research and putting all the paperwork together. And we filed a temporary restraining order on Monday. And we actually won the temporary restraining order, which meant that this franchisee got to stay in the business. He got to continue to get shipments of gas. And basically, we saved his business, right? So that was my introduction to franchise law in the franchise world. And then at that point, I was kind of hooked, and I went on to work in some other capacities within the franchise industry. Sure. And I can just add to that a little bit. So that was when I was in private practice, and then later I went from private practice to working for a corporation. So I was a in-house lawyer at Dunkin,
Hmm.
doing franchise and business law. And then after that, I became the general counsel of Little Caesars. So
Mm.
Little Caesars has pizza restaurants in all 50 states and 30 countries. And so that was great. I ran the legal department there, and we grew the legal department, grew the business. And at that time, I had seen, I thought, I thought at the time, every possible legal dispute you could imagine. A lot goes on at in coffee shops and pizza
Mm.
locations, as you can imagine. If you could think it, the crazy scenario could come up and come to the legal department and come to me to try to, resolve the legal issue. So I did that for a long time, and as you mentioned, I was also a company president. I was president of a coffee chain, a franchise coffee chain.
Mm.
So I really saw franchising from all angles, and in particular, in mediation. So I'm now a mediator, and during this time, I mediated, I'd say probably hundreds of cases as a participant.
Mm.
And I was really just really intrigued and really fascinated about the mediation process. And that led me to decide to open my own mediation business.
Cool.
Oh, that's you have such an interesting background. You know, as we were getting ready for this recording, and I looked and I saw all the different roles that you had. I was pretty intrigued, you know, especially since now you're starting your own business. So I'm going to ask this question. Usually I'm asking this to somebody who's already been in a while of starting their own business. But for you, it's interesting because you're at the outset of now at this stage of your career, starting your own business. So let me ask you this. What are some of the key challenges uh, for somebody who's going to make that leap? And some of these people listening here aren't ready to make that leap right there on the other side. But what are some of the key challenges for you when you were thinking about, wow, now's the right time for me to actually take the leap myself? What were some of the key challenges that might have held you back or that you've encountered since you started your business?
I guess if you're doing maybe a pros and cons list, right? So and you look at it, and on the pro side, being a mediator for me has been wonderful because when I looked at my 30 years in my legal career, I said, what am I good at and what do I like? And usually what you like is what you're good at, right? And I spent most of my time in my legal career resolving disputes. And I said, that's what I'm good at. That's what I like to spend my time on. And I was fortunate to be in a stage of life where I could do that. So that was the first thing is find something that you love and it's worth putting in, a lot of effort to do that. So for me, that was mediation. For other
Mhm.
people, it could be maybe they're in a law firm and they're doing a particular type of law, or maybe they want to do like a subspecialty of a subspecialty.
Yeah.
Whatever really, floats their boat and gets them excited, they can do that. And they can also do it in a way where they're not doing it because maybe the senior partner wants them to do it that way or the CEO wants to do it that way. It's because you want to do it that way. So that's the first thing. Just before we
Mhm.
get to the other side,
Yeah.
make sure that you really have a passion for it because you're going to need the passion to get through all this other stuff.
Mm.
Okay, so once you check that off, you got the passion. The other is the admin side. So I had worked for a large corporation when I left the corporate world. I was working for a company called Authority Brands. I was the chief legal officer. They actually had 16 different franchise brands when I was there, and I oversaw that. They also owned a software company. So a company like that, you can imagine, had great support. So they had something called the IT help desk, which I wish I had it today. I wish I could call those guys today. I have no IT help desk.
Mm.
So back then, you just send them an email, and a few minutes later, your computer would be fixed, right?
Um,
So that was probably the biggest thing, and that goes to the website, all that other technical stuff, and also accounting, marketing, and sales, and all that sort of stuff. You really have to. Look in the mirror and say, who's my head of accounting and IT and marketing, and that's you, right?
Right, right. So those are something that they're big changes for you. I love that you said there the thing about like the way you addressed your answer to that. Like, first of all, is passion's really important. Like if you can do and focus in on what you really love doing, it makes your working life a lot easier. And you also there mentioned the thing about freedom at this point in your life, right? You're at that stage where you have a little bit more freedom to be able to choose what you're going to take and what you're not going to take. It takes not the right word, but the types of matters and clients that you're going to have. So kind of growing into that in your career, it takes time. So I love that you love what you're doing. You said it's wonderful, which is terrific. Knowing where you are today, right? And you have some challenges about, who's the IT person, who's the marketing, all that sort of stuff. But knowing, um, where you are to knowing what you now know, what might you have done differently in your career now that you're a solo?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been fortunate to have a long career in doing a lot of different stuff.
Mhm.
I think that for me, when I launched the business, I think, for people coming in, I would say, just be aware that the other stuff is time consuming. You can get through it, but that does take some time and some effort. And I think in starting a mediation business for me, when I look back, I would say, look myself in the mirror and say, okay, are you ready for all this stuff? And I was. I would also say that, in this day and age, I sound like an old guy, these days, we have ChatGPT, right? So for me, ChatGPT is sort of my strategic advisor, right? So all of this other stuff, the admin stuff, ChatGPT, I didn't really figure it out at first, but eventually I said ChatGPT is a lot smarter than me, right? So I look at the mediation stuff. I got that figured out. Okay, I can do that. All that other stuff, like, okay, accounting. How do I do accounting? How do I invoice? How do I collect money from how do I
Yeah.
do that? And even marketing. ChatGPT has been a great, like I like to say, advisor. So I would say, if I were to do it over again, to use ChatGPT a little bit more on the early side, because ChatGPT in some way is my IT
Yeah.
department and my accounting department.
Yeah. Let me ask. Sometimes I come across people and say, God, this isn't as bad as I thought. You know, I've been kicking this around thing, and as a lawyer, I talk myself, will I take the leap? Will I not? This is a better offer. I'm going to stay, etc. And they say, God, I wish I'd done this a lot earlier. It wasn't as bad as I thought. How about you? I mean, what are your thoughts on that in terms of timing for you personally?
Yeah, so for me, I've always wanted to be a mediator for as long as I can remember. So it was a timing issue.
Yeah.
And back when I was a participant in mediations, I would call it the miracle of mediation, right? So, and I still see it today. So before a mediation, one side says, I'm not going to accept anything less than $1 million, right? And then the other side says, I'm not going to pay them a penny. In fact, they owe me money, right? And so, when you look at that and you say, wow, how's that going to settle? So I saw that during my career, and those cases ended up settling. And so again, the for me, the being meaningful to be able to do that
Mhm.
is really rewarding. So the point is, I've always wanted to do that. Now,
Yeah.
then there's a timing and a realistic issue, right? So the timing was there was definitely a point in time, okay, and that was when my daughter graduated from college. Okay, so when I have two children, my daughter graduated. She's the younger. That was my last tuition check,
Yeah.
and so once you write that last tuition check, it's sort of, with apologies to Bridget Balconi, there's sort of freedom, for the parent. So for me, that happened, and I really sat down and said, what do I like doing? What am I good at? And
Yeah.
I said, resolving disputes. So then I went into the living room one day and told my wife, hey, I'm thinking about quitting my corporate job, and what do you think,
Yeah.
right? And so I think I would have liked to have done it earlier, but just from practical
Yeah.
purposes,
Yeah.
it came at the time that it came. And so my question for my wife, I had a couple questions, was, what do you think of that? The other question was, hey, does your employer offer health insurance?
Yeah.
So that's a very important thing. If you're going to go into business for
Yeah.
yourself, have a spouse that has an employer that has health insurance. So for sort of practical reasons, I am where I am now, and I took advantage of the 30 years of practicing, and I do that every day, in mediation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
Well,
terrific. I saw Bob
it's
laughing.
interesting. Oh, sorry. It's interesting having the support of a spouse when you or spouse or partner when you decide to go off on your own probably is an integral thing for you as
Mm.
well, right, Brian?
Well, exactly. And that's something that, yeah, you got to have spousal support. So I was in the early stages of my thought process, bringing my wife into the process. So I didn't just surprise her one day and
Sure.
come home from work and say, "Hey, I quit. I got no paycheck. I'm going to just launch this business." And with mediation, it's a little bit different than law firms because in law firms you might have a book of business. So as a
Mm.
mediator, I've had great relationships with people on all sides, lawyers representing franchisors, lawyers representing
Mm.
franchisees themselves, the entrepreneurs and the executives. So I had great relationships and they see me as a fair person. I think as a lawyer, probably the best compliment you can have is if you're in a very heated dispute with somebody, right? And then the lawyer or the party on the other side then wants to hire you, right? So throughout my
Mm.
career, I think I've been fair to everybody. And even when I've been in heated disputes
Mhm.
with people on the other side, those people that were on the other side, they now want to hire me to be a mediator, right? So to me, that's the ultimate compliment.
That's really cool. So that kind of leads us to the question, we all love what we do, but we also do what we do for a long period of time. And then there's a time when we decide, it's time to retire, it's time to move on, or when you decide that you don't want to be practicing the law anymore, how do you want people to look back on your work? How would you like the impact of your professional work to be remembered by others?
Right. So, yeah, I appreciate the question. So, yeah, becoming in this stage of life an empty nester, you think
Mm.
about things like legacy. And for me, and not to make it too dramatic, but, being a mediator is sort of a calling, right? So, being a mediator, to be in a position where you can help people resolve disputes, help them put that behind them, go on with their life and be happy and successful because they put that behind them. That's really what I want as my legacy, as well as, I'd like to say a pretty darn good lawyer for 30 years before that.
That's great. And for those listening that might be in conflict now and are thinking about some things that are coming up that they may need your services to act, in mediation, um, what's the best way for us to direct them so that they can reach out to you? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah. So I have a website, balconimediation.com. So again, Balconi, easy to remember. It's not too many people named Balconi. It's actually Italian for balcony, right? So
Yeah.
uh, that's my last name. And then my email address is similar, Brian at balconimediation.com. So either one of those, or you can go on my website, pull up my phone number, and I guess I'm used to being available 24/7, so you can call me anytime. Might be sorry for that, saying that on the podcast, but you can call me anytime.
Great.
Well, Brian, I love the talk there about, it's really a vocation and the mediation process is wonderful, right? At helping resolve disputes. And the balcony thing, maybe there's a tie-in somewhere where like you help people come to the balcony to observe their situation. One person wants, $1 million and the person's not going to give them a cent. You help them come to the balcony to
Yeah,
resolve and move forward. But
How about when you want to move out of the cheap seats?
there you go. Go to the
oh,
balcony.
Go
there
to the
you go.
balcony.
Some people use it. Actually, interesting that they actually use that in mediation. I found
Yeah.
out, and
Yes.
it to go into the balcony means to sort of
Yes.
cool off,
That's
right?
right.
Yes,
Like, hey,
yes.
why don't you
Oh
go
yeah,
to the balcony
outside,
and
so you're
get
getting
some fresh
the
air?
air, right? When
Yeah.
you need some
Yeah,
fresh air, go out to the balcony. I love
Yeah.
it. That's
But
really cool.
it's been great chatting with you. I think the work that you do is so important, and if we have more time, I'd love to share and get into all the details, but I appreciate you coming on today, sharing your story of how you came to be, a solo entrepreneur lawyer these days, helping people resolve disputes.
okay. Well, thanks. It's been great.
So you've been listening today to Missing Briefs, where we unveil the untold business stories of lawyers, their triumphs and their trials. If you have an interesting story to tell about your own triumphs and trials of owning your law firm, or you know someone else that does, have them get in touch with us. I'm Dominic Grew.
And I'm Bob Furlong.
Until we meet again.